Hello, I'm Victoria Takeda with the Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Film Festival, here to welcome you to the CATS panel presentation on intergenerational relationships. Tonight, we spotlight 4 filmmakers screening their film at our film festival, which begins Friday, October the 28th. Join us now for this hour presentation exploring the vast and varied landscape of intergenerational relationships with filmmakers Ngoc Lee, Tam No, Olivia Tai, and Debbie Vu. Each spotlights this ever-present issue like rescuing books from dusty shelves, where stories are never fully read or discussed, when dreams are lost and mother tongue or previous lives lived are packed away in suitcases and never opened. When parent and children are locked in roles, each seeking wholeness in unspoken conversations. And yet, their understanding can come full circle in moments when each is seen or found in shared conversations or tender moments while teaching the artistry of slicing chicken. Join us as each filmmaker shares their passion for their craft and stories from our communities. Now I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Alina Yin, who will introduce our co-facilitator and filmmakers. Alina is a first-generation Cambodian-American entrepreneur, artist, and producer. Recent productions include the Other Perspective podcast on the Cambodian Vietnamese diaspora, Healing from War and Trauma, and the Only in San Jose podcast, a civic education explainer on local government, and she currently serves as the creative director of the Santa Clara County SJSU AAPI Oral History Project. Alina.
Thank you so much, Vicki. Such an honor to be here tonight with all of these amazing women. And I want to introduce my co-moderator, Caroline Moore. And Caroline is on the current board of directors for the contemporary Asian theater scene, fondly known as CATS, for the last 20 years. And so to start us off, I wanted to quickly share the synopsis of each short that we'll be discussing today. And to start us off, we're going to start with Ma's Kitchen by Debbie Vu. And so Ma's Kitchen is a semi-autobiographical short film set to become a feature film about Debbie Vu, her mother, their language barrier, and straddling between two very different cultures, Vietnamese and American. Debbie, can you share about your genesis story on the creation of this film and how you got started with the idea?
Yeah, so it started as a documentary because I wanted to preserve my family history. And reality kind of set in 2017 when my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so it was really important for me to express myself and share my story, but also do it in a language that she understands. She has not seen any of my work because it's all in English. So this is my first Vietnamese American film. And, COVID shifted a lot of things for all of us. And what I realized as a filmmaker is that I could be producing and writing. That does not require me to be on set, in person, any of that. So I spent 12 weeks writing this feature film, and it was so easy to write. It just flowed out of me because it was rooted in my reality. But it's based on all the lessons and advice my mother gave me as I was growing up. And so the bones were there and the meat, everything is fictional. All the scenes, none of that has ever happened to me, but the root of it, right? The advice, the takeaways is what is authentic to my piece.
Thank you. I loved the film, and it definitely resonated with me and my own experience with my mother in the kitchen. And when I saw it, it was just something like I've always wanted to see something like that, but I could never really explain it. And you made it happen in 12 weeks during COVID. So that is amazing. Congratulations. And I can't wait for the world to see it. Yeah. And our next film is, it's Family Ties by Olivia Tai. And Olivia is a first-time student filmmaker, and Olivia interviews her family, revealing a yearning for intergenerational connection and exploration of their shared Taiwanese diasporic roots. Olivia, can you share about how you got started with your film?
Yes. I was sitting in a dark theater in my senior spring of college, and I was watching this film called The City of Sadness by Hao Xian. And as I was watching this film, which is a slow cinema piece on the 1940s in Taiwan, documenting the beginning of martial law and the 228 incident, I felt myself imagining my grandmother, who was around 12 at this time. And when basically when the curtains kind of began to close and I had stopped watching this film, I was left there like sobbing as all of the other students got up and went off to finish their homework and continue on with their lives. And I felt this really big impetus to call my grandmother and understand her story. So like tears streaming down my face, I haul my butt out of my seat and walk out, and I call my dad and I ask him, Dad, can I call grandma? Can I learn more about this? Is this sensitive? Can I continue this questioning? And after that, there just became these series of conversations and calls with my grandmother. And what I initially thought was going to be a documentary about her life and her history became a really joyous weekend of connection with my family, and hours of interviews with my aunt and my dad and my twin brother and my younger brother and my grandmother. And out came Family Ties in whatever form it is in now.
It's a beautiful story, and it reminds me a lot of my journey of trying to discover what happened with my Cambodian roots. And so watching it definitely felt like the empathy and the yearning that you're talking about. And also, I just love the perfect pun with your with the title. That worked out great. So our next film is Rising from the Fall by Ngoc Lee and Tam No. And Rising from the Fall is a documentary interview film about the Vietnamese Americans and their parents, grandparents, children, and relatives. The interview will be about a journey of coming to America or growing up in America and sharing stories of the Vietnam War. It's a collection of stories of coming to America. I'm sorry. The purpose is to create a dialogue between the old and new generation, to understand the struggles that both are facing, and a way to keep cultures relatable and start their own conversation. Please tell us how you two got started.
Well, Ngoc and I, we both met in high school, and we both went our, separate ways as we started college and everything. And we happened to both be in San Jose around the same time, or she had just come back from LA. And so I went out to meet up with her for lunch, and we just kind of started going into, what's been going on with our family. And we started noticing that there was a similarity. Her grandfather's story sounded a lot like my mother's story. So we went home and asked my mother, like, do you know this person? Because the stories match up so much. And it was a story about how they survived the war and their contributions to the war as well. And so once we realized that it was exactly the same story, we then questioned, like, how is it that I know this family history, but for Ngoc it's something kind of new. And so we started realizing that within a lot of different Asian families, that some people share about what they've went through and some people don't. And so it impacts the kids when they don't have that connection to their history. And so we then wanted to create this film, or at least do something to kind of just get the conversations going.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how I know Tam I met her parents for so long, and I would go over to her house, after school and stuff. And I didn't know that her parents, especially her mom, was like best friend with my grandpa's siblings. They were in CIA together, and she knew like my family so much more than I did. So it was a really crazy thing for us to explore. And I called my mom, and she also kind of knew about her Tam's family a little bit too, but we never knew how much we were connected until we start talking about it.
Yeah. And so it's just kind of like, we realize for a lot of families, you don't even know where to start with the questions. Like, even if you, like, you do want to connect, but where do you start? And so we hope that the film inspires people to just kind of go back to their family and dig into our history a little bit.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I definitely relate to the side of the family that does not talk about it. And you always have to tread, very carefully, like Olivia had mentioned. And this theme that cuts across through all three of your stories is really amazing. And but I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to Caroline now for the next part of the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Alina. And once again, thank you to all the filmmakers for being here today. In your films, you really portray and you explore the intergenerational relationships between children and immigrant parents and immigrant grandparents, and also the challenges as well as the eventual resolutions that come with those relationships. And I think Asian Americans in particular really resonate with these relationships and the challenges and difficulties that come with it. And so my question is, when you decided to pursue the arts, did you encounter any challenges, pushback, difficulties with your families, the intergenerational, your parents, your grandparents, when you decided to pursue the arts? And did they understand? Were they supportive? And if they weren't, how did you forge ahead anyway? So with that question in mind, Olivia, can you answer that question?
Yeah. I have I think, generational buffer in that my dad ended up being a person who went into finance, and he married someone who was into STEM. And I think, being the next generation, there was, I'm very lucky for this, but more ease around me pursuing the arts. I won't say it was ever really deeply encouraged, but ever since I was young, I always loved to draw and paint and do music, musical theater. Yes. I mentioned this the other day when we were all chatting, but even though I have kind of felt some light support, I've had to intuit a fair bit, if it's something that makes my parents proud. My dad has a intellectual reasoning for why he doesn't tell me that he's proud of me. I believe there are other reasons for this, probably related to how his parents affirmed him, but he's never really said that to me. And so I've had to take these other cues that are affirmation and support for what I'm doing. And I think this piece in this project was a bit of a gift, and to my family, an attempt to, in my own way, find some, feel like I'm doing something for my father and for his family. And one thing that he said, although he didn't say too much once the film was ultimately created, was he began to share the YouTube link to some of his coworkers and people who he's worked with in the past. And that made me feel really happy. And then I asked him, like, well, how do you feel about sharing this? And he said that he feels seen, and that there was something about his story that was being portrayed in this piece. And him sharing this documentary was like him finally being able to express some of himself to these people who he's known, many of whom are not Asian, not POC folks, in the world of finance in California. And that this was finally a way that he could share an aspect of his life that was more hidden. So again, trying to intuit some of these moments of what, hoping that he feels proud. And I think that action and some of those words from him were really meaningful for me in these past few months.
That's so incredible. What he said about finally being felt seen from your film. I mean, that must be so inspirational for you. And what an affirmation too. It's also so interesting. We've heard from other filmmakers, Asian American filmmakers, that they never were directly told by their parents that they were proud of them, but they had to just kind of interpret that through their actions or overhearing them. And I know for me personally, the only way I knew my parents were proud of me was when I eavesdropped on their conversations with their friends and other family, and they were bragging about me. So, you know, it's very indirect. And I think that's really an Asian American thing too, that's been passed down through the generations. So that's interesting how things like that get passed down. Great. Well, thank you so much for that. Ngoc, can you share your experience?
Yeah, for me, I always wanted to pursue art since as long as I can remember. I love acting, I love directing, writing, but it has been a rough journey for me. It wasn't easy. Like, I remember telling my mom I wanted to be in front of camera and behind camera, and she just cut off my the cable. She said all of this is toxic and there's no way you're gonna make it, like, you know, like just very harsh words. And for me, like I just knew, like, if I'm from it, I grew up for a while with a single mom, so she meant a lot to me. So I just focused on school, getting straight A's, whatever I could. I started going to college with engineering degree at first, but you know, when you know something that when you love something so much, it's hard to let go of it. Even when I was doing engineering, I was still trying my way to you know, do like film. Like, I would join the student film station, and I would write, produce, edit, and I would make short films for my church, and, you know, do whatever I could to let it out of my system. And I think I won like a short film contest, and I got to go to LA, and it was actually at Korean. And that's when I was like, wow, there's so many Asian Americans who are doing what I want to do, and like, it's possible. So I went home and I changed my major without telling my family, and I just went for it. And a lot of them didn't know until my graduation, until I remember my uncle was texting me. He was like, wait, this is not engineering department. And I was like, yes, I'm not doing engineering anymore. And it was really hard for them to accept, because I'm the only girl in my family. I'm the oldest out of all my cousins. So the expectation is for me to follow my aunt, my uncle, who works, you know, from Google, Apple, all these big companies in biotech as well. And they wanted me to follow their footsteps, because they came here when they were maybe in their 20s, 30s, and it was rough for them, you know, not knowing the language. For me, I came over when I was 10. So I was the expectation is like, I go straight to 4 years as the first of my family and then follow their footstep and do more than what they could done. But when I didn't do that, it was a very big disappointment for my whole family. And it was really rough. Like, family gatherings were very hard. Like, I was put in the middle of so many conversations, and I was being shamed constantly. Oh. And, you know, I had my uncles, you know, would be cornering, like putting me in a corner of a wall and tell me, wake up, you're unrealistic, all these things, you know. And it's hard, but I think because I get to grow up in America young, you know, at a younger age, I see the possibilities of what I can do if I put my mind to it. And yeah, I just you know, I respectfully, you know, respond to them. And my younger cousins support me so much, and they always encourage me and tell me like they are there for me every time they see certain things happen to me. But yeah, and I think just being able to surround myself with creative minded people, it's been really helpful for me. I started out by working, you know, for startup companies, like media companies, but also for nonprofit like Jubilee Media, collaboration. And these were like the outlets for me to feel like I belong here. I can do this, you know, and just kind of like shut out the negativity that I get from my family. And I think eventually as time passed, they can see that my desire, my passions are not just hobbies. Like they can see, like I just got my first network credit for acting and making this film and other projects. Sometimes I would, share with them, and sometimes it's hard to share when, like they're gonna shut you down. But whenever I feel is appropriate, I would share with them, and hopefully, as time passes by, they can open up their heart more and, be okay that I am not the niece or granddaughter that they wanted me to be, but I am still someone that they love.
Yes, and
That was a long
wow.
share, sorry.
Well, no, that's such a powerful story, and I'm sure that resonates with so many Asian American artists. That familial intergenerational pressure to go into something like engineering or be that doctor or lawyer is so strong. And you mentioned the feeling of shame that they try to put on you for pursuing the arts, and I applaud you for having the strength to go on under all that pressure. So that's
Tam is one of those people in my life that constantly cheer me on and encourage me to keep going. So yeah.
So Tam, can you share your story and any conflicts you overcame by becoming an artist?
So my parents are actually in the interview, so my family has always been pretty supportive of it, but there was always like, a little bit of questioning behind it. I remember when we finished shooting and my mom had come to ask me, like, why are you doing this? It looks like you're spending your weekends, that's your free time. Like, why are you doing this? And for me, my response was like, when I was growing up, it was definitely in one ear, out the other. None of it meant anything to me. And it wasn't until I moved out to San Francisco, where there was not really a strong, large Vietnamese community like there was in San Jose. And I missed my food. And people noticed my name Tam, and they had questions about it. So that made me then like go back home and ask those questions to really start like understanding like my identity. And so like with that said, I feel like if it wasn't what I appreciate about Ngoc so much is that if it weren't for strong, courageous women like her, Rising from the Fall would have never existed. If you don't, if she was not courageous to like really move forward in learning the craft, then the space for Asian women filmmakers wouldn't be there. My background is I'm an entrepreneur. I'm involved with a lot of nonprofits. I've never been formally trained in the arts. So to have somebody that is there allows us to be in many spaces rather than be boxed into one that is deemed respectable by our parents. And so I mean, even though my parents are quite supportive, they still question it, but I feel that with this film, I was able to do them honor. I was able to let them know that all those times when it went in one ear, out the other, there was something that actually stuck with me. And this is my way of apologizing for kind of being a bratty American teenager and honoring the name that you've given me and making sure that your story is told. And at the very least, we can hold on to our history.
That's great. And I think it is because of women like you that we are seeing Asian American women represented in this art space, which is so important. So thank you. And Debbie, can you share your story with us?
Sure. So I'm the baby of the family. I'm the youngest of four. So the oldest had to deal with, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, all that talk. But by the time it was my turn, they were hands off. They said, you're in control. What you want to do will be there. And I got into my dream school and I had to figure out what I was going to major in. And, my parents had seen me perform on stage and write a lot. And so, I wanted to major in dramatic arts and creative writing, but my parents said, no, you got to do something practical. So that got me thinking, let me put them together and try to be a news anchor. And so I took journalism classes, and one of the classes a project. It was a short documentary, and I just fell in love with being behind the camera and having that eye, and revealing my perspective. So, but I don't get affirmation.
Mm.
And as an artist, you need affirmation to keep going. And lately I've realized that I am my number one cheerleader. I am the one that knows everything that went into what I do.
Mhm.
So honor yourself, and just keep going. Just keep going. That's all you have to do. Just go with the flow and listen. Listen to the people around you and take it or leave it, whatever people tell you. You know, I had been told, don't do this, don't do that by people. But that's when I realized that there's limits and there's boundaries. And if we know what those are, then we can break them.
Mm.
So we filmed in my kitchen. They told me, don't use your own home. I filmed in my kitchen. They said, don't put your film in public on YouTube or Vimeo. Don't make it public because you have to put it through film festivals. And I said, no, I'm going to put it out there. I want the world to see what I've been doing. So my parents are so important to me and my growth. And I'm so glad they said, do something practical. I am so grateful and so glad, because I never would have thought of becoming a filmmaker. I thought I was going to be a writer. I thought I was going to be an author of 5 books. That's what I wrote to myself, 5 books. But I'm so grateful that my parents intervened and were there for me to influence and get me thinking about the bigger, broader world out there.
Great. And it certainly sounds like you have broken down some barriers, and that you definitely are an inspiration to those young artists coming up to keep on just breaking those barriers down. And
Thank you.
stop listening to, all the negative feedback.
Yeah.
That is one ear out the other. That should go.
Yeah,
Definitely. That's a good one.
I don't want it.
Great. Okay. And Alina, I'm handing it back to you.
Thank you. I just want to share a little bit of Ngoc about your stealthy major switch. Love it. That's the kind of an unspoken rule between me and my cousins. Whenever we have a major life shift, we tell each other, but we don't tell our parents until there was, I think, one time where, she wanted to switch jobs. And so she just was looking for different jobs. She's like, but don't tell the parents until I've landed the job. And then, so we always had this method of when we deliver news to our parents, because that was the way that we had to navigate space. And Debbie, I'm so glad that you decided to put it out there, because I think the gatekeeping of like precious stories is just, it's oppression.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we need to have these stories out there. And yeah, so we are all more than aware that the few existing Asian American narratives that we have in the mainstream are not only incorrect, but they're causing our community a great deal of harm. And which makes me feel like this film festival and each of your films is an act of resistance, an act of courage, and creating art that challenges and shifts and sets new narratives, and also just the deep love that you're producing from. It's a love letter to your family, and this apology letter, and it's like an acknowledgement, and it's a kind of awakening to who we are. And so I'm so thankful to be on this panel, to have seen your movies. And so to wrap us up, I wanted to ask if each of you can talk about how creating and birthing this story into the world impacted you before and after. And to those who have seen it, whether that be your friends or your family or a larger audience. And so I'll start with Ngoc.
Sorry, the question is how's birthing
So
the story has impacted before and after?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, when we first started working on this, like, it was really difficult for me to talk about what I'm doing to my family, because my mom kept asking what I'm doing and why I'm asking like all these random like questions about history. And I really wanted to also bring my family into my documentary, but it was just too difficult for me at the time. But yeah, afterward, I was able to learn a lot from, like, you know, when we interview people, I learned a lot, and I was able to get inspired by my own project. And I started talking to my grandma more, and I took a trip to Canada to meet with my grandpa's siblings, and I got to hear more stories from them. So definitely, like, it made me be more curious about the history within my family and just overall. And we did one screening live, and it was amazing, just like just watching people reacting to what we, you know, worked on, because we look at it so much, sometimes we're like, we don't know how it's going to turn out, but like just seeing how people were able to connect to it, whether they are Vietnamese or not Vietnamese, they were able to come up to us and share their stories. And a lot of people were like, oh, do you have more of it? I'm like, no, just 40 minutes. You know, so it was definitely opened my eyes to keep sharing. And you never know who you're going to touch. You never know, you know, who you're going to inspire with, you know, by sharing your truth.
Exactly. And I was also very surprised to see one of my friends, Christina Fan, and her family. And so I was just, when I saw somebody I recognized, I was just glued to the screen, and also had to have a box of tissues as I was watching it.
Yeah, thank you.
Tam, would you like to add to that?
So when we were shooting, it was really cool. It was really exciting. You know, especially when we were able to really capture the stories the way that we intended to. The part that was most emotional for me was when we were in, you know, in post-production with editing everything. As I was editing things and I'm putting subtitles to words and everything, and I'm now really, really hearing the story, and it just hurt me to the gut that, like, I remember thinking, like, oh my God, like, they just survived a war, and they just talked about all the PTSD they went through and how they had to overcome it. And did I just like peel off a Band-Aid and open up a wound? And I just remember being so emotional and just thinking, like, what did I do? Like, these people are now at peace, but I made them go back, you know? And then we're also having to add B footage to everything, you know, matching up a lot of the stories from the war with like actual things that were happening. And all the footage and images that we were getting were real live things, you know. I'm having to, in our documentary, we talk about how one of the participants had to go hide out under a bomb shelter. So I had to go look for footage or images of like bomb shelters. And now I'm seeing like this was a reality, you know, and I remember just feeling really, really tormented by that. Because obviously that's not something that I could ever go through myself, luckily, because of my parents' sacrifice. But to look at my parents now and like see them as like somebody that went through all of that and survived and kept going, that is where I feel like there's so much honor in telling their story. But once we were able to finish and like put it out there to the world, I think one of the comments that I appreciated the most was from the younger generation perspective. There's definitely a shared sentiment that we grow up with stifled emotions because of our duties and our obligations to our families. And with this documentary, now the older generation is also able to hear that like younger generation has obstacles too. You know, there is a contrast between coming to the United States and growing up in the United States, and both have obstacles. And here's this opportunity now to like learn about each of our obstacles and how it shapes us as a whole community.
Yeah, I can't imagine how hard that must have been to look through the footage, and then also probably be reminded. I was like, oh my gosh, I was such an angry American teen during all of that.
Like, exactly. Yeah. And that's why this film to me is just so important, you know. And I was glad that my mom did ask me that question, like, why are you doing this? And it was like, I wanted to show you that I did listen, and I am so thankful for you.
Yes, I see a lot of these films as a form of gratitude to our parents' sacrifice. And what you were saying earlier too is learning about their story and their trauma, but also their life beforehand, helped me to see my parents as human beings and not my mom and my dad, but as individual beings with their own problems and their own dreams. And it definitely helped in therapy when I put it all together.
Yeah, it definitely puts a lot of things in perspective. Like one of the questions in the film is one that was inspired by my family. When my brother was 18 years old, he asked my mom, like, what were you doing at 18? And my mother's response was, oh, I was a prisoner of war. And so it's just like, whoa, like, let's unpack this, you know? It definitely makes, as you mature and you start understanding what that means, you take a pause and you're gonna like check in on your family.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. So Olivia, even though you have that generational buffer, you also went on the same journey. Can you share about, how did creating it, how were you impacted before and after, and how was it received?
Mm. My father's side of the family was always really shrouded in secrecy. And in contrast, every Christmas, I would go visit my mom's side, so my Texan grandparents, where my grandpa would present these 3-hour-long slideshows of his childhood, where he grew up in Plano, Texas, and met his wife when she was in middle school and was like killing rattlesnakes. And I was always wondering why there was so much asymmetry between these two sides, why my dad didn't really want to go home, why I didn't actually know many family stories. I also could obviously feel this like cultural and language barrier with my grandma. Um, and so I think creating this film was like finally a chance to poke and prod into this. And if I'm honest, like take a more active role in my family and view myself as someone who could begin to like this. I mean, it almost felt selfish in some ways, but begin to kind of like tie these threads back together and bring some of these conversations back out into the open. I was very fearful that I was overstepping my boundaries with this because I was like, I know nothing. I'm like 22. I've lived a very different experience than my dad, even than my aunt, and then especially than my grandma. Is it proper for me to really be like poking here? But I think that because I almost had this like new fresh like energy around this, I was able to kind of bring these bridges in and just open up these conversations. My aunt is pretty reserved, and my grandma is as well. And so even just having the camera there and me telling them, this is for my Harvard class, I need to get a good grade in this class, please present. It was like suddenly an impetus for everybody to really open up. And I think when I was able to share that footage and all of those notes with the rest of my family, it was almost like all of us, even though it's just a small family, I have 3 cousins and an aunt and an uncle, and just my grandma surviving. It was like in this small community, we could finally hear each other and begin to listen. So to answer that second part of the question, who saw it and how was it received? I don't think anyone else needed to see this other than my family. It really was something that was like meant for us. And my aunt afterwards wanted more and more footage. She's like, where's the director's cut? Where are all the other parts of this? And I said, I already spent hours and hours making this 7-minute edit. I can send you hours of footage if you'd like to watch it raw. But, I think after they had seen it and there was like this kind of communication and conversation on these little email threads with my grandma, and everyone, I felt like sated. And it was like a radical enough act in this like really kind of local way. So now having more other people see it, it does feel a little bit vulnerable, a little scary to me. But as we've all talked about in this broader mission, it's just like beautiful to be able to share these stories and talk and even be on this panel with you all and try to relate and connect to this from, the generation that I'm in, and as a younger person who's just trying to create and connect with family. Everyone is doing that almost all the time.
That's amazing. I think each and every one of you are just phenomenal, and I'm so humbled by your courage to create these films and be vulnerable and like share your story even now. And it's so important. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important right now is when I was growing up, a teenager watching television shows about families, I saw like Full House and Boy Meets World. Those are the shows that I had to grow up with. And I always wanted my parents to be like the lovable, super affirming and like making sandwiches. I got sleepovers, all of that stuff. And I never understood back then. And I remember resenting my parents for not being more friendly and like, why are you so weird? Like, why can't you be like the parents on TV? And I'm sure that caused them a lot of harm and hurt as well. But if I had grown up with these stories instead, then I would have understand, because it's a way to connect and humanize. And we have a little bit of extra time, so I kind of want to just open it up a little bit because you haven't spoken to each other. And so if there was anything that you wanted to respond to that like Ngoc said or Debbie said, like I'll just open it up because I want to, create that dialogue between you all too.
I haven't gone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Debbie, please.
So this is a very special piece for me. It is a video love letter to my mom, who is battling cancer, and I'm in such a hurry to finish it. And to be able to do a short film first and show it to her. We're just like on our phones, like doing screen share on Facebook video chat. And she just really, really enjoyed it. And I'm just so glad that it was an intimate viewing. We're across the country, but we could like see this together. And she said it reminded me of you and me. And that was all that I could ask for. My niece actually plays me, 13-year-old me. And it was really cool because I showed her this DVD that they made of a musical that I did, Beauty and the Beast. And I showed it to her. She's like 8 or 9 years old, and it made such a deep impression on her. So when she's like 12 years old, I reach out to her, say, I want to see you act. I want to put you in a movie. And she just fell in love over and over again with acting. And so now she's competing in her high school for a theater competition out in North Carolina. So I think to see, like, I watched this girl grow up, and for her to emulate me and bring life to the stories. Like, there were some funny moments that I didn't plan that at all. Like, there were some really nice moments that just happened organically. And that was such a beautiful thing to watch. It's doing well in film festivals. It's getting more acceptances than rejections. So that's like, whew, all right, I'm figuring it out. Because this is my third short film that I've written, produced, and directed. And it got me an award as best director of a short film. So I was just like, my jaw dropped. I was like, oh my God, I'm being recognized after being overlooked almost all my life, fighting and fighting and fighting to get my work and my art out there. They said, don't spend money. Don't spend your own money on your productions. I said, no one's going to believe in me if I don't have something to show. So I'm going to work my butt off to make this money so I can make this movie. And fortunately, because of COVID, I had to get into grant writing because I needed money to keep my business going, which is really cool because November 1st, it's going to be 5 years in operation, my production company. So I'm just so honored. But so with the grant writing, I actually got 5 grants for the film. But the thing is, it's chump change. Like, I appreciate it and I love it and I love the support, but man, I need more money. So if there's anybody out there, hit me up, or at least watch my stuff and share it. Get on my Instagram, like follow me, because we need that level of support from our community. We can only do so much, and what is that it's a collaboration and it's a co-creation. We're putting this together. Everybody has a place with us. So I'm just so thrilled, and I'm very hopeful for the future. And I know Ma's Kitchen is a hit, and I'm so glad that other people see it too for what it is. So I'm very grateful.
It is definitely a hit. And again, I'm deeply sorry that I misspoke there. And I think it's just this whole thing has been so emotional. I'm like getting ahead of myself. And I do want to mention, like, one of the things that impacted me when I watched your film was you had mentioned that none of this happened. It is, fictionalized based off of your lived experiences of like different experiences, but that it was also what you wish would have happened. And the customer service, portion in the end, just that really hit home because that is something that is so simple that someone could have thought of that, like that's a policy decision at some company, but they would have had to have somebody with some sort of lived experience or sensitivity to be able to say, like, oh, we're serving a different kind of customer now, it's broader, and we should be more sensitive to people who don't speak English, as a first language. And so there's these little, and I come from a civic education and legislative background, and so that's like something that really stuck out, that if we could be more thoughtful. And your film is honestly, it's something that I could take to a city council meeting and say, like, see, this is an example of what you could do. It's not that hard. And honestly, it is a huge treasure trove. I'm glad it's public because I'm definitely going to take that and show people that we could be more thoughtful when we're talking about how we approach diverse cultures and different, language accessibilities. Yeah, so I already did my wrap up before, but to kind of close it off, I wanted to offer a moment, to each of you, anything that you wanted to say that resonated with you tonight before we hand it off to Caroline for logistics.
I love hearing, I forgot who it was, I'm so sorry, but I love the like going in one ear and out the other, and also like paying attention, and like we y'all, you were saying it like we appreciate you, we love you, we're doing this for you, and that's beautiful. That's all we can ask for, is to use our art form, to use our vision, our minds, and putting it together. So I think that's really special.
And I feel like it's something that's kind of Asian too. We're not ones to say I love you to our parents. Like, it's already a little awkward with our siblings, but like definitely not with our parents. And so when we put something out there and they can see it, that's like our little nudge. The same way that they always have like a bowl of rice with food when we come home,
Yeah, that's so cute. I love that. There's different ways to show your love, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think like that's what I have learned to really appreciate about being Asian American, is that like there's this whole American concept of how you communicate love, and it should be verbally expressed. That's what we see in the movies. And that's like, I think like as we grow up and we see what's on the movies and it's not matching in our household, we struggle with that. But now I've gotten to a place where like I appreciate it. Like I don't need to hear those words. I know that my parents show me love because I can feel it. And I know that they can also feel my love because I made a documentary.
Yeah.
See my love, feel it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think it's very prevalent in the Asian American culture to express love through actions as opposed to words. And I know growing up, I think, Alina, you mentioned it, you were watching these sitcoms on TV, and they would express their love verbally, and that didn't happen at home. So I think it is very much of an Asian American phenomenon. And it's interesting, speaking of this whole generational thing, how it is passed down from generation to generation, to show your love through action as opposed to words. And when I became a parent, one of the things I really wanted to do was kind of break that narrative or break that chain. And so, I say, or I try to say as often as I can verbally, that I love my kids. But hopefully that'll be something that we see evolving, especially through these films. So.
And if I may ask, Caroline, when you tell your kids "I love you," like, do you feel any awkwardness, or does it come natural? You know,
That's a
I'm
great
curious.
question. And it's interesting because I don't feel awkward about it at all. And I think it's because I started when they were just infants, and it's just continued that I say, "I love you," as much as I can. And especially when, I'm saying goodnight to them. But it was interesting because having never, ever heard that from my parents my whole life, and both of my parents are deceased now, it's interesting that I didn't feel awkward, but I didn't. And the same goes for physical demonstrations of love. In my family growing up, there was never any hugging, no kissing. It was all through actions like making food and, signing you up for piano lessons, things like that. But with my kids, I've tried to be very, very physical, and that hasn't been awkward either. So it's nice to see those barriers breaking, when we can.
Can I share a quick story about the I love you?
Yes, please.
So I'm bipolar and
Mm,
I've been hospitalized 7 different times.
really?
And the last episode was last November. And that was really hard on me and my fiance. And my mom was there through it all. And we talked, maybe a month or two later. And I kept telling her, I love you, I love you. And she said, that makes me feel uncomfortable because when you say, I love you, I love you, I love you, it concerns me. I think you're ramping up. I think you're about to have an episode. So I can't even say I love you to my mom
Wow.
without her worrying about me.
Interesting.
But she knows I love her. I think we know, but maybe it's the American culture that like brainwashes us into thinking we have to love in a certain way.
Do you think
Yeah.
maybe you haven't said it before and then suddenly you say it?
Over and over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah.
How interesting. Oh,
Yeah, my parents, they didn't start saying it, I would say, until I was in my 30s. And then it was weird. And now they text it. I'm like, even now I'm awkward about it. I was like, okay, love you too. Like,
Same here. And all the emojis.
yeah, and I had to have a friend who is Caucasian, I would say in our mid 20s. One day he was like, what's up with you and hugs? You never hug me. Like, we've known each other since we were 12 and you don't hug me. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you wanted a hug.
I used to
They
be an
taught me
awkward
how to
hugger.
hug.
I used to be an awkward hugger. People would just like wrap their arms around me and I'd just be like this, like.
I actually have a question for Olivia.
Mhm.
Like, what in your filmmaking journey with Family Ties, like, what was the one thing you learned that you didn't think you would come across?
Mm. Oh, that's a good question. I think the most surprising aspect of it, I mean, there's so many twists and turns along the way, given that a documentary process is like very emergent. I guess I suspected this, but was like confronted with it pretty harshly. But my grandma didn't want to like talk at all about her past and her history in Taiwan. And I think what a surprising like ultimate like message and feeling of the film was that my grandma just is like effusive with her joy. Like she has this like beautiful smile and she just is always like cackling, laughing and like throwing her head back and is really joyous. And I had at one point asked her, have you ever fantasized about like your life in Taiwan or other like realities that you could have lived had you not immigrated to the States? And she said that what mattered most was that she was present and like here, and that this was the life that she is focused on. And she's so grateful for that. And she's so present focused. So that was, I guess it's not like a surprising thing that I learned, like a fact, but more so like I felt like my grandma really was a teacher to me in that moment, like a source of like wisdom in that I learned that her like worldview and the way that she has approached life has allowed her to be, in her mid 70s and like super, she has so much like mental clarity and she's really fit. She does these hour-long like exercises every morning and she's just like really happy and bubbly and like, so energetic for someone who is so old. I mean, in my mind, she's old, but she's doing so well. So that was surprising. And there were a lot of other like technical learnings of just how to be a filmmaker. I think I spent so much time in the beginning talking to my friends, so like other Asian Americans who had either done like pieces like this, or were artists, or my professor, because I just was one, I didn't really know how to go about creating a documentary in the first place, or being a filmmaker, and like how long it was going to take and what it entailed. But I also had a lot of these like ethical questions, which I think some of you mentioned, like how is it okay to really ask someone to relive some of their pain in front of a screen and then to share that with the world? Is that really okay? So I think I maybe didn't learn something like easy. I don't have a simple answer for that, but I have a lot more nuance on like how to go about that. I still don't really know. I don't know. I still have questions there.
Yeah, and that was so interesting when you mentioned that earlier, that you didn't want to exploit her past at all, or, you know, the ethical question of, you know, making them relive some past trauma for your film. So that is something that, you know, is really an issue that you do have to grapple with, I'm sure, as a filmmaker. And I know I shared with you how I tried to, both of my parents were incarcerated in the Japanese, now they're calling it incarceration camps during World War II. And my dad was so reluctant to talk about it. But I think if I had presented it to him as I wanted to make a film about it, possibly he could have opened, or would have opened up more. And so doing it in the form of a film maybe is a way to extricate that information. So it's a neat way to think about it as a vehicle for them to open up about their past. And maybe
So
it can
for
help
Ngoc
for them.
So for Ngoc and I, after we had finished interviewing a family, we had noticed they were sitting in their car outside the studio for like an extra 3 hours. And they had already finished shooting for like 2 hours full of interview questions, but we had already opened up this can of worms, and now their mind is there. And instead of driving home, they're going to sit in their car and keep going, you know, and that was the inspiration that I was really hoping to deliver with the film.
Yeah, we
Wow,
had,
that's amazing.
yeah,
I've never
we,
talked to my family for 3 hours straight.
yeah,
Neither have I.
we separate like the younger generation. Like we would ask them interview like questions first, and then the older generations, and then we would ask them together. So that was like the format of how we went about our film. But it was really cool to get feedback later on from, you know, the younger generation telling us how, because of they didn't know what they were going in for fully either. Like they knew we were going to ask questions about the war and, you know, the relationships, but they didn't know what it would be like in that 2 hours until they went through it. And then like Tam said, like afterward, because we already like warmed them up, I guess, like they were able to like open up more when they went home. So that was something like we felt like we achieved our goal.
That's great. And
Yeah.
that's a major accomplishment too. So I can't believe it, but this hour has just flown by. So we are
Yes.
going to have to wrap up. So I wanted to thank Alina again for moderating, and to all of these amazing filmmakers. Thank you so much for participating in our panel today. It was a great discussion. So we'd like to encourage all of you at watching this today to watch these films as well as other films. We have feature films, documentaries, and short films at the Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Film Festival. And the live festival in person begins on Friday, October 28th, and goes through Saturday, October 29th. And it'll be held at the AMC Sunnyvale Theater. And then our virtual film festival runs from October 28th through Sunday, November 6th, where you can view many, many films, including these three films we featured today. Again, Family Ties, Ma's Kitchen, and Rising from the Fall. So for more information, please visit svapfilmfest.org. And once again, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a great discussion. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.